Good day. My name is Charles Gidega Ochaya. I'm a lecturer in business management, and I'll be teaching you purchasing and supply environments. Now, when we're discussing environmental analysis, we had left out the bit about the internal environment of a company. We discussed so much about external environment, but we needed to go more and discuss about the internal environment of a company. There's a learning outcome that deals with theories of management. This is something that you have done before in the first year, I believe, and it shows you how thinking about the internal environment, especially organizational behavior of companies, has evolved over time. The earliest ideas around how organizations behave came from the classical viewpoint. There they focused on hierarchy, technical requirements, formal structures, and then chain of command, the things that Taylor spoke about, those principles we did in first year. Then later on, there was an improvement, I believe, where now the organization, the businesses were not considered to be mechanical as such. They wanted to see it from a more humanistic perspective. They had to take into account issues around how groups operate, people in organizations operate, leadership structures, and the informal behavior, the communications, and how people generally relate within organizations, because that was found to be very important in success of businesses. Later on, a new school of thought came up. This is the systems approach to organizational behavior. They sought to combine ideas coming from the classical school with those from the human relations orthodoxy. Their approach took into account the importance of the external environment. They wanted to look at businesses not only from within the organization, but also taking cognizance of the external factors, the external environment. In other words, how the business operates, how its success so much depends also on external factors. So it's more a holistic kind of view of organizations. This is the systems approach. Then later on, a new school of thought emerged. They believed in contingency. Contingency is about situations as they are at that moment. So because the environment is so complicated, you needed to have contingency plans in place in case of emergencies. So this school of thought saw the world as being very complex. The environment is very complex. So organizational readiness really matters, and they would be able to deal with problems as problems arose. Now, we also have a more detailed look about organizational structures. This was in the next learning outcome, where you had to look at several organizational structures. Luckily for you, I gave this also in the, I believe, in the assignment, where you had to look at various organizational structures. The very simple form of organizational structures you've done before, in which you talk about the departments within a simple organization, departments like human resources department, production department, marketing department, and the finance department. It would be the same diagram that you're seeing there, only that the bottom part would have been left out. In all the modules that you've learned before, especially in first year, whether you be taught finance or whether it would be PMKG, or whether it's operations management, or whether it's human resources management, they would almost always start off by explaining to you the simple form of the organizational structure, thereby putting everything in perspective. You then learn about marketing with regard to that simple structure. In other words, it is a contextual view of that model or module within that framework. Right. So now, this diagram you're seeing there is a more complex one, where the simple structure has been extended to an international divisional structure. Imagine now that simple structure on top. Now the company becomes larger, it grows. Then how does it organize its international operations? Thus you see the diagram with France, Japan, Egypt, Australia, Argentina. Those are the different countries in which the company now operates. It has become international, it has grown. So a company might decide to organize its work or its structure in this way, so that they know the reporting lines, channels of communications, and they can devolve authority accordingly. Now, most of what we'll do today is around organizational growth. How do organizations become larger? How do they grow? What drives them to grow and become larger? So we start off by looking at the reasons for organizational growth. Why would they want to become larger? Okay, in terms of employees, in terms of market capitalization and things like that, turnover, market share. Why would they want to be going in that direction? Now, firstly, firms grow in size for many reasons. Growth could be an explicit objective of management. In other words, it might actually be the desire for management, for the managers, to see the company growing and becoming larger. Okay, which they actually believe to be helpful for business. Also, growth can bring about greater security for managers. They can command more capital, they can raise capital from stock exchanges, they can approach organizations because they will be known. They're in there for the long haul, right? Smaller companies sometimes are not highly trusted, in the sense that if they don't have a long track history, they've not been there for a long time, often it would be difficult for them to raise capital. Right. Growth also facilitates the maintenance of market share. You can see that point there. It can help maintain market share when the market in which the business operates is expanding. And especially when markets become more international. So market share by maybe mergers, acquisitions, which we shall look at also. They would then become larger, have more outlets, and more people under their wing. Another reason for organizational growth is that because of size, they will enjoy economies of scale. Now, this idea of economies of scale we've met before, and essentially is about larger companies being able to command more in terms of inputs, for example, that they use in their production processes. Because they are able to buy more in bulk, they are likely also to get discounts from their suppliers. So it also means that they are able to cut costs simply because they have a larger command. And again, lines of credit become available if the company is well known, they have been in the business for a long time, they are large, they are not running anywhere. Okay, they won't just easily pack up and go without a trace. So people tend to have more trust in that kind of like. Other reasons for organizational growth include the ability to diversify into other markets. Diversification is all about spreading the risk. You want to reduce or lower the amount of risk that you might be able to suffer in case the business fails. So if you've diversified, it means that you are doing businesses in different ventures and at different levels of production. Perhaps you could have positioned yourself to actually supply your company with raw materials. You're actually procuring for yourself, and you are also even in distribution. Okay, what is known as vertical integration. Alternatively, it could also be, as we shall see, that of conglomerate diversification. You are into different businesses doing different processes. Okay, and then in the area of product development, when a company gets large, it's able to employ researchers and develop new products. You know all about new product development from the product life cycle. So growth also is slightly associated with investments and commitment to improve the products that you are offering to your customers. And then finally, growth also can be seen as a defensive strategy. If a company buys up all its competitors, maybe it acquires all its competitors. Say, for example, a security company comes into the country and buys up all the former, the other companies. G4S buys up security systems, Trojan and all of that. It will guarantee the survival of that company for a longer while. They will kind of be like. Now, growth can be both internal or external. It can be either internal or external. Internal growth is a process for firms that start small. Then they capture a segment of the market and continue to expand. So this is the normal trend with many small companies. They start small, they increase their market share, and they do not merge with others, but they grow by themselves internally. Okay, that is one simple way to do it. But Then one advantage of this kind of approach is that the company grows within the structure of management. It's likely that you will retain the old people that you've been employing all along. You do not have to retrench them, and they grow with the company from the start in a way that can be a good thing, rather than trying to bring two boards, two companies merging with two different mindsets and organizational cultures. This can also lead to failure of mergers. Okay, so there will be no problems of bringing together two different management systems. Again, furthermore, there can also be economies of scale from building a bigger plant. So as you grow, you become larger, you may also be able to expand, build up a larger factory and supply more. Now, internal growth has certain disadvantages, and that is why many companies that become larger do not use the internal growth approach. It will take too long, for example, and if the company started off perhaps as a family company, the likelihood of it becoming a global company is very, very low. Now, some of the advantages of external growth. Now, let us examine external growth. External growth is fast, or is faster, and then the productive capacity can be much quicker, right? You do not have to take a long time building up to capacity, full capacity. Here it can be fast. You can take advantage of opportunities in the market and quickly move before the opportunity evaporates. Then when you have external growth, such as in the case of a merger, the acquiring firm has access to an established management team and system. In other words, two companies join, they form a merger, then it's a matter of adjusting here and there, but the knowledge set is already there, the systems are already there, people know what they're doing, and then you just reorganize in a very crisp way, then the success is likely to succeed that way. There is no need for additional cash to be raised if the shares of the acquiring company have higher values than that of the acquired firm. So if a company is taking over another company that is failing, then they are likely to inject capital. They will be doing that with the full knowledge that they have the finances to be able to prop up and overturn the failing company. So they buy them out and restructure everything. Okay, and that can be a cheaper way of doing things rather than building new factories or new plants. So simply buying out an existing plant and turning it around might be a cheaper way of doing things. Now, when you're dealing with mergers, here we're still on the topic of growth. How do companies grow? Well, merger is one of them. And then mergers can be horizontal or vertical. You can have horizontal or vertical mergers. Now, when you say horizontal, that means it's across. I gave you the example of a company, say for example G4S, acquiring another company, perhaps security systems, and then G4S again acquires another company, say Trojan, and so on. It is acquiring within that level of skill, that skill level. They are not going to do anything different from what they've been doing before. So in that case, they're merging, and they'll be practicing the same skills, using the same skills in the same industry that they're used to. Okay. Obviously, perhaps I can also tell you that when you're dealing with vertical mergers, it is now where you are going into, you require new skills. Say again, G4S wants to do a vertical merger. Perhaps they would be thinking of going in back into the supply chain and acquiring companies that supply monitoring equipment, see, like cameras and so on, which is a different ball game altogether. Okay, whereby now they need technical skills, IT skills to be able to install those monitoring cameras and so on. That is, but for horizontal, it means that the company is still doing the very same thing that it used to do. They require the same skills, but now applying it to the companies that they have acquired. Now, motives for this type of merger include economies of scale. Okay, horizontal mergers allow merged firms a greater level of specialization and the benefits of economies of scale. The larger, the better. The more you have command of certain things, buy more, get discounts. You are known in the market. You can approach banks because of your size. You're well known, and you can get credit as well. Okay, because you wouldn't be disappearing anytime soon. Also, this kind of merger enhances the market share. By acquiring a competitor, you are actually growing your revenue base, and you have a larger market share. Okay, thus you can eventually perhaps have a say in the pricing in that industry. I think you've done monopoly and oligopolies and other market structures, so you have an idea about all of this. Also, mergers, horizontal mergers, can be a reaction to competitors. Okay, in order to beef up your structures. Now you have vertical mergers as well, the one I alluded to earlier. A vertical merger involves firms at different stages of the same production process. I gave you the example of G4S now going to be a supplier of monitoring equipment. They have to buy digital cameras, they have to be able to install alarms, monitoring equipment. They have moved back into the value chain or the supply chain, and so if a company merges with its supplier, then they've done backward vertical integration. Here they also give you an example of a merger between a car manufacturer and a metal pressing company. Obviously, the car manufacturer needs metal that they can reprocess, recycle, and be able to use again for the body of the car. Then reasons for vertical integration. Again, vertical integration can be forwards or backwards. If you're going back into the supply chain, you're looking to control the source or the supplies of raw materials. In other words, if you have a supplier, who has great bargaining power, you remember the bargaining power of suppliers. If you have a monopsonist only one supplier in the industry, only one supplier who supplies you, then it might be a good idea to actually become your own supplier. In other words, you are removing the monopolist from the scene, and then you are able to procure raw materials directly from the source. Or alternatively, you can actually buy out the supplier so that you can control all the supplies for your own production process. You supply yourself. Also, by moving backwards into the supply chain, you are able to restrict the supplies of raw materials to competitors. This can be, therefore, part of a strategy where if everyone, for example, uses petroleum, and then you now go into petrol logistics, you buy them out, and then you are able to supply yourself and then supply your competitors at your own terms. Then that way you have market power. Now you are now the monopolist. Our forward integration into the supply chain looks to control the quality of outlets for the finished product. You want to be able to supply your customers the finished product on your own terms. Maybe you want to you buy out a distributor, someone who distributes your products, okay, who knows the distribution channels and so on. But now you are able to buy them out so that you can control the supply of your product. Okay, it could be that the supplier is charging you too much for supplying the product, so you actually want to do it yourself because you believe you will be doing some cost saving. So in all cases, you can see that economies of scale, becoming larger, helps. You are able to procure more, to negotiate contracts, to get discounts, to get lines of credit and things like that. So that is a very important, it's a strategic concept pertaining to mergers. Then you have conglomerate mergers. This is slightly different, whereby you are diversifying into entirely different markets. The skills that are needed will be different, and it doesn't feature anywhere in your supply chain. Okay. For example, I think they give an example of, say, a retail outlet now going into car manufacture, or buying out a company that deals with car manufacture. These are two completely different ball games in terms of the skills and in terms of the link within the supply chain. It may not be there at all, or it's not there at all. Okay, so these mergers are neither vertical nor horizontal, but involve a merger between firms involved in producing different goods. The main motivation for this type of merger is diversification. So you are diversifying. If it's a company like G4S, moving out of the security business entirely and going, say, into farming, buying out a company in farming, then they're trying to form a conglomerate. I remember there's one that was called Hearst. I believe it was originating from Holland, Hearst, and they were into so many product lines in different countries. So you can look that up and try to find out how involved they were in international diversification. Now, the idea with diversification is to spread your risk thin, because you're in different industries requiring different skills. If you can succeed there, when things go bad in the industry you're used to, you can easily focus more on maybe farming maybe car manufacture. So a completely different ball game in order to reduce risk. Okay. So in summary, organizational growth deals with the size structure of firms. Okay. The size structure of firms. Firms have a tendency to become larger over time, either fueled by internal growth or external growth. Okay. Firms can grow internally through organic growth by itself or externally through merger and takeover. So they can merge or they can have buyouts or takeovers. There are many motivations for growth. This includes increasing the market share, enjoying or reaping economies of scale, diversifying to minimize risk. Now, when it comes to financing growth, growth can be financed internally through reinvested profits or externally through banks, the capital market, and the money market. So when it comes to financing growth, you can use your own savings or you can use your retained profits. Every time you make a profit, you keep a certain percentage which you then save and you will reinvest. You will use that to grow after paying off workers, after paying off overheads and things like that. The capital you've retained can help you to grow and become larger. Okay. Also, you can raise funds externally through banks, loans. You can also raise through issuing of shares in the stock exchange, like the Botswana Stock Exchange, and the money market as well. Also, you do have micro lenders who can lend you money, but these are short-term loans. There are so many things that there are several limits to organizational growth, such as diseconomies of scale. Sometimes when you become too big, you have too many businesses going, too many concerns, and you are just a board of 5 people. It can become unmanageable. Okay. The organizational structures can be muddled up. The lines of communication can also be unclear, and you are no longer focusing on your core strengths, but you're trying to draw on multiple skills. This might not be so easy. Okay. So also pertaining to organizational growth, the small firm sector is an important source of output and employment, and the importance has increased over time. Many factors have influenced the growth of the small firm sector, including technology and policy and so on. There's an exercise I've left you with. Finding what are the sources of financing growth. How do you finance growth within a company? Okay. And then for each of the ones mentioned in this slide, name the institution and the facility that is available to the borrower. For example, you may be telling me about CEDA and other schemes that the government has. You may be mentioning the institutions, the names of the banks, and the facilities that the banks have, the names of those facilities, and so on. For example, I know that Stanbic have some facilities, and then you can borrow up to, I believe, 50,000-60,000 for micro enterprise. And then finally, this is a graded assessment. This assignment requires you to identify, then explain the various growth strategies a firm can adopt when it wants to expand. Then secondly, what factors limit the growth of a company? In other words, how far can it go? Can it go on indefinitely, or there's a limit to its growth? Thank you so much. That will be all.